Okie dokie artichokes. Welcome, English teachers. Kristian Kuhn coming at you, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of composition. And I got a really sweet synthesis unit up my sleeve to kick off the new academic year. The essential question is this: to get a tattoo or not to get a tattoo? I have created a hypothetical situation in our prompt, which we'll get to in just a second, where we have a 17-year-old student at the cusp of turning 18 with that big decision to make: to get a tattoo or not to get a tattoo. In this writing workshop, I'm only going to show you how to do the introductions because this is a very long video. So I'm going to break it down into 3 segments, and I'll give you the brief impetus behind it. So I did a lot of teacher training this summer through the National Writing Project, and I teach teachers how to Bob Ross their instruction. And that might sound weird, but I'm going to model what that looks like in just a second. So what you're going to see are teacher exemplars. So I know in this line of business that oftentimes when I tell teachers, hey, you got to position yourself as the expert writer in the classroom, it terrifies them, that prospect of writing in front of these mean-spirited teenagers. But it ain't so bad. So before we jump in, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's called Kristian Kuhn, the Bob Ross of composition. Spread the word far and wide to friends, students, colleagues, and help me beat that tricky algorithm. As far as the sources and the slides that you're going to see in this presentation, all the slides, so everything that's forthcoming, is down below in the description of the video. You just got to scroll down a tad bit and you'll find things. And then the sources that we used are there. One caveat about the sources: some of them are good, some of them I wasn't so fond of. So we told students, you can go find your own, but you use caution. Try to get some concessions, rebuttals, and things of that nature in the source material. Now, if you do like what you see coming up here, know that I run a slew of professional development. I do one-on-one mentorships with AP Lang, AP Lit teachers, on-level teachers. I've worked for the National Writing Project for a good many years, and one of the things I often hear about professional development, and I know this is utterly true of my 23 years in the classroom, I just can't get enough of these staff development days. They definitely improve my teaching. Said no teacher ever. So if you're looking for some rock solid PD with regards to how to tackle composition and teach composition in more effective ways, then please give me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. I also got my webpage there, www.teachinghowtowrite.com. So let's take a look at the prompt. Riley, at the cusp of turning 18 years of age, is deeply considering whether or not to get a tattoo. In weighing the pros and cons, they continually return to the following statement from Enrica Ruggs, an associate professor of business at the University of Houston. And here it is. In the past, tattoos existed on the edge of society. They were found mostly on outsiders from the mainstream and usually represented individualism, even rebellion. But that has turned around. Many tattoos serve opposite roles now and are designed to depict belonging. They can be visible shout-outs to a person's culture, orientation, profession, or some other group. Some memorialize a rite of passage. Others show symbols that reflect the wearer's faith or reflect an in memoriam image that honors the passing of loved ones. But in saying this, even with today's relaxed attitude about body ink or newfound admiration, depending on your inclination, levels of acceptance on the job can vary. So here's what we got to do with this. Carefully read the following 6 sources, including the introductory information for each source. Write a letter to Riley that synthesizes material from at least 3 of the sources and develops your position on the following essential question: to get a tattoo or not to get a tattoo. All right, let's break this down, and I'll talk about why we cloaked the language of the prompt as such. So AP language I've taught for 23 years, and I'm noticing that they are putting like what I call lead distractors in their prompts. So that Enrica, what was her name there? Enrica Ruggs quote: is all kind of smoke and mirrors in many ways, but basically it's saying to the kids, hey, your thesis can go here. It can say yes, it can say no, it can qualify, and all the various directions that the thesis can go, right? So in the end, that's ultimately what students are going to say. Yes, get the tattoo, Riley. No, don't get a tattoo, Riley. Or, here are some things to consider and weigh the pros and cons for that. So before we dive in, let me explain a little bit further what I was mentioning earlier about Bob Rossing your instruction. Teachers, I strongly encourage you to say, this year, I'm going to be the expert writer in the classroom and cease to assign writing assignments, right? Assigning ain't teaching. I'm going to encourage you all, get to your proverbial easel and canvas a la Bob Ross and paint with and for your students. So he comes on Joy of Painting and he says, hello, happy little people. Today we are going to paint, etc., etc., etc. And in this particular assignment, I say, hello, happy little students. We're going to tackle introductory paragraphs for this particular prompt. So I'm going to Bob Ross it. I've painted a whole bunch of introductions. And by the end of unpacking them, I guarantee you, students and teachers, that you'll be able to execute your own declarative or inverted thesis, flawlessly executed. Here it is, all right, the heuristic for the declarative thesis. You begin with the thesis. So you just say, Riley, get it, Riley, don't get it, or Riley, I'm going to qualify, right? You begin with the thesis. By context and background, and I'm going to demonstrate this because it's a little abstract, I talk about the seeds of the line of reasoning, setting up the GPS, laying a roadmap down for your reader. Your reader needs some directionality in the introductory paragraph that hints to like, hey, I'm going here in my body paragraphs, right? You don't want to be dogged, you don't want to belabor it, but you do need to set a GPS. And I also want to see a fair amount of tier 2 level vocabulary, but there's a caveat to that. We're writing to our friends, so we don't want to totally geek out and be overly pedantic in our diction. But, it's an academic paper, so let's try it. Here's the kicker with this though. I really want to get my students to practice that teeter-totter balance between colloquial, vernacular, and tier 2. And by tier 2, I simply mean like your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. So I want a little bit of wordplay going on in here. Sentence constructs. Early in the academic year, I run my Word Study Academy and my Nuance Academy. And in the Nuance Academy, we explicitly study those dudes, Strunk and White, who came up with something called rule number 18, which espouses the idea that there's 12 sentence types that can be patterned 20 different ways. So my students will just be getting oriented to these teachings. And in my samples, my exemplars, I'm going to demonstrate those patterns and those types. So that is the declarative. And with all my introductory paragraphs, they are 4 sentences long. We can flip it and go inverted. And in this case, you set your GPS, right? You lay the roadmap down, the seeds for the line of reasoning with the context and background. And the 4th sentence is going to be the thesis. Yes, get it, Riley. No, don't do it, Riley. Caution, Riley, right? Same old stuff. Tier 2, sentence constructs, exactly 4 sentences. All right, I've been talking into the ether, bloviating way too much. So let's unpack this and take a look at exemplar number 1. I'll read it and then I'll unpack it for you. Hi, Riley. With a decision such as this, it is important to truly ruminate the gray areas, and less so the all or nothing propositions. There are definite and concrete variables that you are going to need to spend time wrestling with. An utmost point of consideration is this: tattoos, especially in the corporate world, are still to some extent stigmatized and judged negatively. And lastly, one really needs to factor things such as placement and size, the finer points of discernment and discretion, right? So clearly the thesis statement just jumps out, right? Have caution, have some prudence, right? And it seems to be that the author is saying, just be weird, just be aware of what you're doing. This is not a decision to take lightly. So let's talk about the most abstract thing: setting the GPS, laying the roadmap, and dropping the seeds of the line of reasoning. Where are the body paragraphs going? And first seed that I see dropped is Corporate America sometimes frowns down upon that. So I need a body paragraph about that. And then the second thing is placement and size. If you get a big honking neck tattoo or a couple of teardrops underneath your eyelids, that's probably not going to bode well in terms of employment and how you're perceived publicly, right? According to this writer. So that's body paragraph number two. And some of you might be saying, but Kristian, what about body paragraph number three? I only do 4 paragraphs: intro, 2 bodies, and a conclusion. So even on my AP Lang exam and AP Lit, my students just do 4 paragraphs. And when I make the video on the body paragraphs, you'll see why. Just for now, just know that that's the direction I go with regards to that. So we are given advice. We want to sound intelligent. So I do want some tier 2 level words. And there's some nice ones in here: propositions, ruminate, concrete, variables, utmost, things like that, stigmatized. So the vocab's good, but it's in the kid's wheelhouse. You know, the kid, I wrote these, but I'm pretending to be like a 17-year-old student. So, but I sound like I know what I'm talking about by having an elevated vocab. But I also do some things in here like wrestling, right? So that's pretty good too. Just to be playful because it is our friend. And then in terms of sentence constructs, whoa, take a look at that second sentence, right? You can get into trickerations like that. Last sentence, you got a comma and a dash, right? So that's all the stuff that I teach in the Nuance Academy so that my kids have voice rhythm flow. So with this next one that we do, see if you can find the direction, right? The seeds that the writer drops, the seeds for the line of reasoning. Give your reader a map, set the GPS. And here's the kicker: before a kid writes, they need to know their direction. They need to know where their destination is ultimately going to end. So let's paint another one so that it's not so pie in the sky. And I'll read it and then we'll unpack it. Hey, Boo, for goodness sake, get off the fence already and do it. While you're ruminating the ifs, ands, ors, and buts, you fail to remember that virtually every single member of Generation Z has a tattoo. Your thinking has regressed and trespassed into bygone eras in which artistic and personal expression were frowned upon. The times are changing, so your cold feet need to warm up to the idea that this is an easy decision to make. I spy with my little eye a thesis statement in the first sentence. Therefore, we got ourselves a declarative, right? So that's pretty straightforward. What else do we have? The seeds for the line of reasoning. Let's figure this out. So it says virtually every single member of Gen Z has one. So we're going to talk about, I don't know, like the lemming effect, or just because the masses are doing it, it's less stigmatized. So it's normalized. So I need a body paragraph about that. And then also I'm going to do like this cross comparative analysis of old generations, the boomers and their perceptions on tattoos versus the new generations thinking on it. So I got some vocab, I got some sentence constructs. As you can see here in the early parts of the year, I really want my students getting used to semicolons, colons, dashes. I'll even use some parentheticals in this. I may even use some ellipses in the body paragraphs, which is seldom used. But in light-hearted topics like this, you can get a little trickier with your syntax and less formal. And I'm digging this one. It's really good. Exactly 4 sentences. The thesis is clearly articulated, but we also know thy direction, which takes me back to this slide again. Right? As we read number 3, figure out the roadmap, right? This is a very easy way to get kids to think about line of reasoning, because the seeds they drop, or the coordinates they punch into the GPS, or the compass or legend they put on the roadmap dictates what's happening in the ensuing body paragraphs, and it's very easy to stay organized. So yes, you can do this, students and teachers. It ain't so hard. Here's number 3. Riley, despite their increased prevalence, especially within our age group, it is really important that you exercise a bit of prudence before you jump into a decision you may later regret. And that is an excellent point to consider. the fact that placing ink to skin is an act of permanence. Furthermore, you are waffling all over the place with regards to what you want to do career wise. And in many professional settings, tattoos are not looked upon favorably. So, my advice to you is that you hit the pause button for the time being. Ooh, crazy sauce, right? So, we do have another declarative thesis. And then in terms of the seeds of the line of reasoning, one body paragraph is going to be around the concept of permanence. And then the second is similar to the ones we've looked at previously in number one, professional considerations. Riley doesn't know what she wants to do yet professionally. So it's probably a good idea to think about size, placement, and the perception that tattoos have in some corporate settings in which they're still stigmatized, doing the same old stuff there in terms of sentence constructs. And I'm showing off for the kids. Like I used a colon just because that's something we're working on in our Nuance Academy. And here's what I want to emphasize though, 3 in. I say this to my students all the time. Repetition is the bane of the writer's existence, right? You don't want repetition at sentence pattern. Often, our young, struggling, emerging writers will clobber us over the heads with independent clause, followed by independent clause, followed by independent clause. So you get that dot, 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 dot stuff kind of going on in the voice, the rhythm, the flow. If they stagger and vary their sentence patterns, they should have decent voice rhythm and flow. But here's the thing, the diction, especially in the tier two, and a little bit of colloquial and vernacular does great wonders for achieving that voice. So let's see it one more time here. Let's paint it one more and take a look at number 4. Hey there, my number one pal. Yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, do it. Do you see? Immediately it's declared. So that's the thesis. Now we're going to lay the seeds for the line of reasoning, the GPS, the roadmap, the compass. In knowing you so well, commemorating your grandma with a tattoo of St. Michael the Archangel, the patron saint of protection and strength in battle, is a fantastic way to honor the fact that she still watches over you even though she's passed. So body paragraph number 1 has to have this spiritual aspect of it. It is not as if you are going to scrawl all over your face and neck. This thing of beauty will be placed discreetly on your left shoulder blade. And while I am not encouraging you to be a lemming, the fact of the matter is that tattoos are no longer taboo. See that? It rhymes, so it must be true. So I want kids to be playful in their language in this, cut loose. We're just experimenting. It's early in the beginning of the year. Try those sentence constructs. Use things like ellipses and parentheses, the dashes, the colons, the semicolons. Be playful with the language, experiment with tier 2, experiment with vernacular, experiment with the sentence constructs. So this one, even though it's lighter in tone, it's more flip, it's got greater levity, done the same way. 4 sentences, lead with the thesis because it's declarative. 2 seeds for the line of reasoning, which will dictate the direction of the 2 body paragraphs. It's the same thing every stinking time. So this really demystifies the process for kids. I'm going to Bob Ross the instruction one more time. Teachers, I encourage you to do the same. Follow my lead. Paint with and for your students. Here's number whatever we're on, 4 or 5. Oh my God, already. You can be a bigger poser. Please, for the sake of God, all of humanity, and even your average run of the mill lawn insect, don't do this. First, unless your intention is to be an absolute sheep, mindless conformist, explain to yourself why this singular action must occur. In other words, consider the necessity as well as the motivating factors. Second, you need to understand that this decision is more permanent than deciding to rescue a puppy or, for that matter, bringing a child into the world. Right? So I want my kids' diction to match the thesis. The words and the tone and the mood that they create with their diction needs to correlate to the yes, the no, or the qualifier, right? And all of these do a very nice job of that. So you might be really astute in your observation and say, but Kristian, the thesis comes in the second sentence. Yup, we're using heuristics, right? And this is the difference between heuristics and templates, I think, one main difference. These are organic. If a student has a clear reason that they can articulate in which they say, hey, Mr. Kuhn, I put my thesis in the second sentence because it makes more sense because, and they can articulate it, bombs away. Organic writing is what we're doing. We're not using formulas, we're not using prescriptions. So, organic writing is what we want. In terms of sentence patterns in this one, they rock, they crush. It's good voice rhythm flow, right? You need that variation, you need that suppleness at sentence pattern. So that is quite a number of them. Hopefully it's demystified enough for you to give it a whirl. So I'm going to pause the video here and just say this again. This is the work of teachers that I worked with over this past summer in my Teach It Right mentorship program. If it's something that you're interested in exploring or you have any questions about, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. The group was small for this particular summit. It was just two teachers. I often do one-on-one. I do work with departments. I have even worked with whole districts in the past. And I got a little Winnebago bus that my wife and I travel in with our kitty cats, and we can come to you or we can Zoom. So check out my webpage there, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, and I will make the body paragraph writing workshop in the coming days. Be well.